For most brides, their wedding day is the happiest moment of their lives, filled with laughter, family, and promises of forever. But for Emily Carter, it felt more like a quiet goodbye to everything she'd once known. She was just 22, sweet, soft-spoken, and raised by a single mother in rural Georgia. Emily had never imagined marrying into wealth. But when she met Nathan Carter, heir to one of Savannah's oldest family estates, she fell in love, not with the money, but with the warmth he showed her in those early days. Or at least, the warmth she thought was real. Emily had grown up in a small, creaking house on the edge of a dirt road in rural Georgia. Her mother, Lorraine, worked 2 jobs, cashier by day, diner waitress by night, but still found time every evening to tuck her daughter into bed with a story and a kiss. Their lives weren't glamorous, but they were filled with quiet comforts, secondhand books, front porch sunsets, the scent of cornbread baking in a rusty old oven. Lorraine often told Emily, "The world can be beautiful, baby, but never let it blind you." She had a scar above her eyebrow and a sharpness in her voice that hinted at things she'd never said aloud. Whenever Emily asked about her father, Lorraine would just shake her head and say, "He left when you were still in diapers, and that was the best thing he ever did for us." Still, they got by. Some nights were harder than others. The fridge nearly empty, the rent overdue, but Lorraine never let Emily feel poor. She taught her how to stretch a dollar, how to walk with her chin up even when her shoes were falling apart, and most importantly, how to protect her heart. "Men with power," Lorraine once said, stirring a pot of beans with tired hands. "They smile at you like they're offering the sun, but what they're really doing is checking whether you'll burn for it." That lesson echoed in Emily's mind the day she first visited the Carter estate. She remembered standing on the grand marble steps, her palms sweating, her floral dress suddenly feeling cheap beneath the weight of the mansion's legacy. Nathan had held her hand and whispered, "Don't be nervous. They'll love you." And maybe he believed that. But even then, Emily had sensed something lurking beneath the charm, a tension, a watchfulness. Her mother's voice rang in her head that night after dinner with the Carters. Lorraine had passed away 2 years earlier, a quiet stroke in her sleep, gone before Emily could say goodbye. But in moments like these, Emily could still feel her presence like a shadow in the room. She remembered once asking her mom, "How do you know if someone's love is real?" And Lorraine had answered without hesitation, "If it doesn't cost you your voice or your peace, it's real." Looking back, Emily wished she'd listened more closely. The house she was about to walk into would not only cost her voice, it would try to take everything. Their wedding was lavish, held under magnolia trees with jazz music and golden lights. But behind the smiles and champagne, something didn't feel quite right. Nathan's family, especially his younger sister Tara, looked at Emily like she was a stranger sneaking into a home that wasn't hers. Still, she believed love could change things. She moved into the Carter family estate, a grand 150-year-old southern mansion with tall columns, sweeping porches, and rooms that echoed when no one was around. Emily hoped it would become a home, but just 3 months later, Nathan was gone. A fatal car crash in the middle of the night. No witnesses. No real answers. Emily's world shattered. Grief turned that massive house into a tomb. Every hallway felt colder. The portraits on the walls, of Carter's long past, seemed to stare her down. And the people still living there, they barely spoke to her. No one offered comfort. Not even Nathan's father, Charles Carter, a man who seemed carved from stone. Powerful, stoic, and always 2 steps ahead of everyone. At the funeral, Emily sat alone in the front pew, clutching a folded handkerchief. Tara stood a few rows behind, arms crossed, eyes sharp as knives. Charles gave a short eulogy about legacy and honor, never once mentioning how Nathan made Emily feel loved. After the burial, the whispers started. "Poor girl," they said. "She married in for money. 3 months, and he's dead? Strange timing." Emily didn't respond. She just stayed in the house, mostly in Nathan's room, trying to hold on to anything that smelled like him. But the scent was fading fast. One morning, as sunlight spilled through lace curtains, a knock came at her door. Standing there was Charles, dressed in his usual dark suit, his tie perfect, his hair slicked back. His face was unreadable. "May I come in?" he asked. Emily, startled, nodded. Charles walked in slowly, looked around the room, then turned to her. "I know this isn't easy," he said, voice low and measured. "Nathan's death is a loss to us all, but I'm afraid we need to talk about what comes next." She furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" He sat across from her, folded his hands. "This family has a name, a reputation. People talk, and the sight of a young widow alone in this house, it draws attention, the wrong kind of attention." Emily stared at him in disbelief. Was he worried about her image? Or his? "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. Charles nodded. "I don't want you to, but I have a solution. A way to protect the family. And you." Then came the words that would change everything. "Emily, I want you to marry me." Her breath caught in her throat. "What?" "It would be a legal formality," he continued, as if suggesting a business deal. "No obligations. No expectations. Just a way to close the chapter neatly. People will stop asking questions. You'll be part of the family, officially." Emily felt her chest tighten. Her mouth went dry. This couldn't be happening. "I'm your daughter-in-law," she whispered. Charles leaned forward, unblinking. "Not anymore." She sat frozen, caught between rage, grief, and utter confusion. The walls around her felt like they were closing in. She had nowhere to go. No family. No money. No way out. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Inside, the silence roared. Emily didn't answer him that day, but the seed had been planted, and in that moment, her life stopped being her own. The day Emily agreed to marry Charles Carter, the air in the mansion changed. Not because it got warmer, but because it got heavier. She didn't say yes out loud. She didn't have to. Her silence, her nod, her defeated eyes, that was enough for him. The ceremony happened 10 days later. No gown fittings, no guests, no celebration. It was held in the drawing room, under the faded oil painting of Nathan's great-grandfather. A local judge came. The family's lawyers signed the papers. There were no vows, no rings, no kiss. Just signatures and silence. Charles wore a black suit, the same one from Nathan's funeral. Emily wore a plain white dress she pulled from the back of her closet. One Nathan had once said made her look like a painting. But that version of her was long gone. Tara stood in the corner, arms crossed again, her face a portrait of fury and disgust. She didn't speak to Emily. She didn't even blink. Emily tried not to look at her, or at the house staff, who moved stiffly, eyes to the ground, as if they, too, were ashamed. The only one who seemed untouched by the awkwardness was Charles himself. He acted like a man fulfilling a business transaction, calm, composed, rehearsed. When the ceremony ended, no one clapped. No one said a word. Charles turned to Emily and nodded. "You're now a Carter again," he said flatly. Again. The word hit her like a cold slap. They didn't sleep in the same room. Charles arranged for her to move into a guest suite on the east wing, a room that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The sheets were crisp. The wallpaper faded. There were no photos, no scent, no life. It was a marriage in name only, but the loneliness was real. That night, Emily sat by the window and watched the wind move through the oaks in the front yard. It was quiet, so quiet it made her skin crawl. She looked down at her left hand. No ring, no warmth, No Nathan. And then came the questions. Why had Charles really done this? Was it just about image? Control? Or something darker? The next morning, at breakfast, she entered the dining room and found Tara already seated. "Morning," Emily said softly. Tara didn't look up from her coffee. "So, how does it feel?" Emily hesitated. "How does what feel?" Tara finally met her eyes. Being Mrs. Carter again. Must be quite the promotion. There it was. The venom. "I didn't ask for this," Emily replied, voice shaking but steady. "No," Tara said. "You just didn't say no." The room filled with tension. Charles entered moments later, breaking it with his usual mechanical greetings. He sat at the head of the table, opened the newspaper, and spoke as if nothing had changed. But everything had. That day, Emily wandered the halls of the estate alone. She passed portraits of generations past, all men, all Carters, none of them smiling. She paused at Nathan's photo on the mantel. His eyes, once warm, now seemed distant, warning her. That night, she dreamed of him. In the dream, he was standing at the edge of the woods behind the house, calling her name. But every time she stepped closer, he stepped further into the trees. She woke up drenched in sweat. The next few days passed in a fog. Charles went about his routines. Tara stayed silent, but watchful. The house staff kept their heads low. And Emily? She began noticing things. The door to Charles's private study was always locked. He spent hours in there alone. At night, the light stayed on long after everyone else had gone to sleep. And sometimes she heard voices, his and someone else's. Once, while walking by the hallway, she heard him say, "She'll never find out. Not if we play this right." Emily froze. Who was he talking about? Her? And what was she not supposed to find out? The next morning, she made a decision. She would enter that study, no matter what it took. Because whatever secrets this house held, they were no longer just about Nathan. They were about her now, too. And Emily Carter, for the first time, was ready to stop being silent. The door to Charles Carter's study had always been locked, physically and metaphorically. It was the only room in the house Emily had never stepped into. Even when she was married to Nathan, Charles made it clear, "That's my private space." And no one questioned it. Not the maids, not the staff, not even Nathan. But now, Emily wasn't just a daughter-in-law anymore. She was Mrs. Carter, at least on paper. So, one quiet afternoon, when Charles was away at a business luncheon and Tara had driven into town, Emily found herself standing outside the thick oak door with a small brass key in hand, a spare she'd found tucked behind a stack of envelopes in the butler's cabinet. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned the lock. Click! The door creaked open. What she expected was an office. What she found felt more like a museum. Bookshelves lined every wall, filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk sat in the center, dark walnut wood, polished to perfection. Behind it was a window that overlooked the back garden, its curtains half drawn. Everything was organized. Everything had its place. Too perfect. Emily stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of old paper and pipe tobacco. A clock on the wall ticked softly, the kind of sound you don't notice until silence wraps around it. She walked toward the desk. Dozens of neatly stacked files, a crystal decanter of whiskey, a framed photo of Charles, younger, with a woman she didn't recognize, not Nathan's mother. There were no pictures of Nathan. None. Emily lingered on the photo. Charles, maybe in his 30s, arms slung casually around a raven-haired woman in a cream blazer. They stood in front of courthouse. His smile was wide, relaxed. Not the cold businessman she knew. There was something oddly intimate about the image. Taped behind the frame, nearly hidden, she noticed the corner of another paper sticking out. She gently pried it loose. It was a faded newspaper clipping from the Savannah Herald, dated July 3rd, 1999. Local judge's son implicated in paternity settlement scandal. Her heart skipped. The article was short but damning. It reported that Charles Carter, at the time a rising real estate executive, had been named in a sealed paternity suit brought forth by a woman named Delilah Langford. The case had been dismissed quietly, no charges filed, but not before a large, undisclosed financial settlement was paid out. Langford. The name lingered in her mind like smoke. She rummaged through the drawer, her pulse racing now. Behind some ledgers and insurance folders, she found a thin manila envelope labeled DL/1998 Private. Inside were several documents, an old notarized agreement, a check stub for $275,000 made out to Delilah Langford, and an unsigned letter. Typed, not handwritten. Delilah, this is not an admission. It is a resolution. You will leave Savannah. You will not contact me or the boy again. Should you violate the terms, the trust will dissolve and there will be no further payments. CC. Emily covered her mouth. The boy? A sharp chill ran down her spine. She dug deeper and found another paper, a copy of a birth certificate, Nathan's. But this one was altered, or rather, an older version with the father's name left blank. Emily blinked. Had Charles paid to silence the truth? Had he forced Nathan's mother, Delilah, to vanish? To give up everything? She leaned back, the leather chair creaking beneath her. The Charles Carter she knew, the one who offered her a marriage of convenience, who sipped his coffee without a flicker of emotion, wasn't just cold. He was calculating, controlling, and now she had proof that Nathan's very existence had been manipulated long before he was even aware of it. Maybe Nathan never knew, or maybe he'd only discovered fragments. But one thing was clear. Charles had spent decades burying the truth beneath contracts, settlements, and silence. Emily stood abruptly, her breath shaky. The walls of the study no longer looked elegant. They felt like they were closing in. She wasn't just living with secrets. She was sleeping in the house that built them. That's when she noticed something odd. A single bookshelf in the corner that didn't sit flush against the wall. A faint draft slipped through the gap. Curious, she pressed her palm against it, and it budged. Behind the shelf was a small recessed nook, barely big enough to fit a shoebox. And in it, a wooden container, locked with a simple latch. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, she found a stack of old photographs. Most were of Nathan, as a teenager, in college, smiling next to people Emily had never met. But one photo stopped her cold. It was Nathan standing beside a man who looked like Charles, but younger. And the note on the back said, "Me and D, summer '98, before they knew the truth." D. Emily kept flipping. Then she saw it. A journal, bound in cracked leather, and a folded letter with her name written across the front, in Nathan's handwriting. She sat down, heart racing, and unfolded it. "Emily, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it. I've been trying to protect you, but I think things are moving faster than I can stop them. My father is hiding something. Not just from you, from everyone. And I've been getting too close. He knows I've been looking. I didn't sign the papers. I never will. If anything happens to me, know this. It wasn't an accident. Please don't trust anyone, especially not him. Nathan." Emily's vision blurred. Her hands shook as she read the words over and over. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. Nathan had been murdered, and now she was living under the same roof as the people who might have killed him. Suddenly, a sound from the hallway. Footsteps. She panicked, shoved the journal and letter back into the box, returned it to the nook, and pushed the shelf into place just as the doorknob twisted. It was Tara. She stood in the doorway, arms folded, eyebrows raised. "What are you doing in Dad's study?" Emily turned slowly, keeping her expression calm. "I was just cleaning. The dust in here is terrible." Tara's gaze dropped to the slightly crooked curtain, the shifted chair, the faint outline of the shelf Emily had moved. She stepped forward, her tone quiet but sharp. "If I were you, I'd be very careful about where I put my nose." Emily forced a smile. "Thanks for the advice." Tara stared for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. But Emily could feel it. Something had changed. She wasn't the only one looking for answers. And now, someone knew she was getting close. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed with Nathan's letter clutched to her chest. Every sentence echoed in her head like a warning shot. It wasn't an accident. Don't trust anyone. Especially not him. Especially not Charles. And yet here she was, married to him. At breakfast the next morning, Charles acted as if the world hadn't shifted. He asked about the garden, the new kitchen tiles, the weather. Emily could barely swallow her coffee. Every word that came out of his mouth now sounded like poison wrapped in politeness. Tara, meanwhile, barely glanced up, but Emily could feel it. The tension between them had thickened. Tara knew she had been in the study. She just hadn't said it out loud. Not yet. Later that afternoon, while Charles was at his law office downtown, Emily returned to the study. This time, she didn't just stop at the hidden box. She began going through the file drawers one by one. Invoices, property deeds, insurance policies, and then she found a folder labeled Private, Do Not Discard. Inside, Nathan's birth certificate. Except something was wrong. The name listed under father wasn't Charles Carter. It was David Langford, a name Emily had never heard before. She flipped to the next page, a medical record, genetic testing, a sealed envelope with lab results. And one sentence stood out in bold. Patient Nathan Carter is not the biological son of Charles Carter. Emily staggered backward, the papers falling to the floor. All this time, Nathan had never been Charles's son, and no one told him. No one told her. It explained so much. The distance, the secrets, the hostility. But why the lie? Why the cover-up? And more importantly, what did Tara know? That night, Emily found herself sitting across from Tara in the parlor. Rain pattered softly against the windows. The fire crackled, casting flickering light on the hardwood floors. "Tara," Emily said carefully, "can I ask you something?" Tara didn't look up from her wine glass. "Since when do you ask for permission?" Emily ignored the jab. "Did you know Nathan wasn't Charles's son?" Emily hesitated. Her hands were trembling slightly, the wine glass in her lap untouched. Tara sat across from her, legs crossed neatly, her face lit faintly by the fire's flicker, like some Gothic portrait that had learned how to glare. "I know you think I'm weak," Emily said suddenly, her voice quieter than a whisper. Tara's eyes flicked toward her, sharp as ever. "I don't think," she said. "I know." Emily's jaw clenched. "Maybe I was. But I love Nathan, and I think he deserved better than whatever this house gave him." Tara tilted her head, swirling her wine. "You think love changes the outcome," she murmured. "Nathan loved this family too once. And look where that got him." A long silence settled between them. The logs in the fireplace popped, spitting embers onto the grate. Emily leaned forward. "You act like you hated him." Tara snapped her gaze up. "I didn't hate him. I envied him." Emily blinked. Tara gave a hollow laugh. "He was always the golden boy, even when he didn't belong. Even when he didn't carry our blood, my father still looked at him like he was the second coming of God himself. And me? I was just the daughter, the legacy keeper, the one who stayed quiet and smiled." Emily stared, stunned. "You knew he wasn't Charles's son, and you still." Tara stood abruptly, the firelight dancing across her features like broken glass. "Don't you dare pity me," she spat. "You married into this family. I was born into it. You can leave. I never had that choice." Emily remained seated, trying to steady her breath. Tara loomed over her, anger radiating off her like heat from the hearth. "I'm not your enemy," Emily whispered. Tara's eyes narrowed. "No, but you're getting close." With that, she turned sharply and disappeared down the hallway, her footsteps echoing into the silence. Emily sat frozen, pulse racing. There were cracks in Tara's armor now, jagged, emotional ones. But whether they meant danger or redemption, she couldn't yet tell. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Tara slowly looked up. Her eyes didn't blink. "I've known since I was 13, she said coldly. "Before Nathan did. Before Mom left. Before this whole house became a mausoleum." Emily's mouth went dry. Why didn't anyone tell him? Tara let out a bitter laugh. "Because my father couldn't bear the thought of the public finding out his perfect heir was someone else's mistake." Her voice cracked on the word mistake, but she caught herself quickly. Charles raised Nathan like he was his own. But deep down, he resented him. You could see it in the way he looked at him, like he was raising a ghost that didn't belong. Emily sat back, stunned. Then why keep him around? Why let him inherit everything? Tara's grip tightened around her glass. "Because Nathan was charming. Because he played the role. Because my father loved the idea of him." She looked at Emily now, dead in the eyes. But that wasn't enough. Nathan started asking questions. About the trust fund. About the business. About things he shouldn't have touched. That's when everything started to spiral. Emily's voice dropped. "Tara, do you think Charles had something to do with Nathan's death?" Tara didn't answer right away. She stared into the fire, her jaw tense, her fingers trembling. Then finally, in a whisper, "I think Nathan found out something, and someone made sure he couldn't tell." Emily's blood ran cold. She wanted to ask more, but she knew Tara wouldn't say another word tonight. Back in her room, she opened Nathan's journal again. This time, she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a folded piece of notebook paper tucked between 2 pages. It was a list. Names, dates, initials. One name was circled 3 times in red ink. T. Carter. Her hands began to shake. Tara wasn't just someone who knew the secret. She was part of it. Emily barely slept that night. Her mind ran in circles. Nathan's journal, the letter, the circled name T. Carter scrawled again and again. Was he trying to warn her about Tara? Had he found out what she'd done? Or what she would do? At 3:14 a.m., she sat by the window, staring out at the shadows that danced beneath the backyard oak trees. Somewhere out there, Nathan was buried. And somewhere inside this house, someone was hiding the truth about why. The next morning, Emily walked into the kitchen to find Charles sipping coffee at the breakfast table, reading the Savannah Times. The paper rattled as he flipped it, calm as always. "Morning," he said without looking up. Emily stared at him for a long moment. "Did Nathan ever talk to you about leaving the family business?" she asked carefully. Charles folded the paper neatly and set it down. "He mentioned it. Once," he replied. "Said he wanted to start over. Do something that wasn't soaked in family politics and bloodlines. I told him that was a coward's dream." Emily clenched her fists under the table. "He wasn't a coward," she said. Charles looked at her. His eyes, steely and unreadable, settled on her like ice on skin. "No, but he was naive." Emily swallowed hard. There was something in Charles's tone that chilled her. As if he wasn't mourning his son, but managing a problem that had finally resolved itself. That afternoon, Charles left for his usual meetings in town. Tara was out shopping. The house, for once, was quiet. Emily took her chance. She returned to Charles's study, locked the door behind her, and began searching more thoroughly. She removed books from the shelves, dug through drawers, flipped through old calendars, and then, behind a stack of ledgers, she found a thick legal envelope marked Carter Estate, Transfer Authorization. Inside was a contract, a complete transfer of ownership of the Carter family assets, signed by Charles, and a blank space where Nathan's signature should have been. Below, it was a sticky note in Charles's handwriting. Still waiting on Nathan's signature. Remind him before Friday. If he refuses again, alternate route. Emily's hands shook violently. Alternate route. She backed away from the desk, her breathing quick and shallow. She had no doubt now. This wasn't just manipulation. This was murder disguised in business terms. She had to get out of the study before someone returned. She shoved the file back in place, locked the drawer, and slipped the key in her pocket. But as she turned toward the door, the handle twisted. It opened an inch before stopping, locked from the inside. A voice. "Took you long enough to start digging," Tara said softly from behind the door. Emily froze in place, heart hammering against her ribs. But before Tara could say more, another sound broke through the tension. A soft knock on the far end of the hallway. A pause, then a whisper. "Miss Emily? You all right in there?" It was Joseph the gardener. In his 60s, stooped from years of labor, with kind eyes and weathered hands. He'd worked on the estate since Charles was a teenager. He was nearly invisible to the family, but Emily had always made a point to greet him. Offer him lemonade on hot days. Ask about his aching knees. "I'm fine," she called out, her voice thin. Tara's voice cut through sharply from behind the door. "You can leave now, Joseph." A pause. Then Joseph's low voice again, calm, measured. "Just checking. I'll be in the West Garden if you need anything." Footsteps retreated. Tara didn't say another word. After a moment, the handle released, and the hallway fell silent again. Emily waited a beat, then slipped out of the study and down the back stairs, her breath still uneven. Later that afternoon, while she was sitting in the unused solarium, Joseph approached quietly, a worn ball cap in hand. "I'm sorry if I scared you earlier," he said. "Didn't mean to intrude." Emily looked up. "You didn't. Actually, thank you." He nodded, glancing around before sitting across from her, a rare act for a man who usually kept his distance. "I knew your husband," Joseph said. "Nathan. Knew him since he was a boy. He used to sneak out back and play by the pond. Always asked questions, curious like his mama." Emily blinked. "You knew his mother?" Joseph hesitated. "Not well, but I saw her. Once. Tall woman. Dark hair. Looked like she carried the weight of the world." He pulled something from his pocket, a folded paper. "I found this in the shed a couple years ago. Don't know why I kept it. Figured maybe it'd matter someday." Emily unfolded the paper carefully. It was a hand-drawn family tree. At the top, Delilah Langford. Below her, a single name, Nathan, born 1996. There was no connection drawn to Charles Carter. "I think Nathan made that," Joseph said. "Don't know what it means." But he seemed real torn up when he left it behind. Emily stared at it, her hands trembling. "Why are you giving this to me?" she whispered. Joseph's eyes were steady. "Because you're the only one asking the right questions. And I've seen what happens when people in this house start doing that. They disappear." He stood slowly. "Be careful, Miss Emily." Then he tipped his hat and walked back toward the garden, leaving Emily alone with the drawing. For the first time in weeks, she felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not grief, but fire. Someone else had known the truth, and someone had once tried to leave breadcrumbs behind. Now she would follow them. Emily froze. "I always wondered when you'd grow a spine," Tara continued. "Nathan always thought you were too soft, but maybe he was wrong." Emily stayed silent, heart pounding. Tara laughed quietly. "Don't worry. I'm not here to stop you. That would be too obvious." The footsteps faded. Emily waited several minutes before unlocking the door. When she opened it, the hallway was empty. But on the ground, placed neatly in front of the threshold, was a single object. A silver fountain pen, the kind Charles always used to sign estate documents. There was a smear of red ink on the cap. Or maybe it wasn't ink at all. That night, Emily sat in bed with the pen in her lap, staring at it. Tara had left it there for a reason. A message, a threat, or maybe an invitation. She opened the drawer of her nightstand and pulled out Nathan's journal again, flipping to the last page. In shaky handwriting, he had written, "If anything happens to me, look for the documents." I didn't sign. I never will. Emily placed the pen next to the words. She had the truth now, but truth was only power if she survived long enough to use it. And in this house, survival was not guaranteed. The storm came in just after midnight. Thunder rolled in over Savannah's low country like distant cannon fire. Rain beat against the windows, and wind twisted through the oaks like something alive. Emily sat awake, Nathan's journal in one hand, the fountain pen in the other, and her heart pounding like a war drum. She had the truth. She had proof. Now, she needed a plan. But before she could decide her next step, she heard something. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Just outside her door. She held her breath. A shadow passed beneath the doorframe. And then, silence. Emily slipped out of bed, crept to the door, and placed her ear against it. Nothing. But every instinct in her body screamed that something was wrong. She opened the drawer of her nightstand and grabbed the only weapon she had, the heavy silver pen. The hallway outside was dim. At the far end, a door clicked shut. She followed. It was Charles's study. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting her in. Inside, standing with her back to the window, was Tara, dressed in black, her hair pulled into a tight bun, her face unreadable in the low light. "I knew you'd come," she said without turning around. Emily stepped in cautiously, eyes scanning the room. "I found the papers," she said quietly. "The ones Nathan refused to sign." Tara nodded. "Of course you did. You always were more clever than you let on." Emily clenched the pen. "You and Charles planned this, didn't you?" Tara finally turned. Her expression was calm, too calm. "We didn't plan Nathan's death," she said. "We simply stopped trying to save him." Emily's breath caught. Tara stepped closer, her voice soft, almost tired. "He was never one of us. Not by blood, not by name. He stood in the way of everything I worked for, everything my father built." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "He was your brother." Tara's smile was cold. "No, he was an obstacle." A pause. Then, and Charles, well, he's a man of legacy. He would never admit it, but part of him was relieved when Nathan died. It solved a very expensive problem. Emily's voice trembled. "So you killed him?" Tara tilted her head. "I didn't say that. And I'm sure if you ask Charles, he'll say the same." Another pause. Then the door behind them creaked open. Charles stepped into the study, rain dripping from his coat, his face pale. "Tara," he said sternly. "Stop." But Tara didn't stop. She turned to him, eyes blazing. "Tell her the truth," she said. "Tell her what you did." Charles looked from his daughter to Emily, and for the first time, he looked old, broken. "I didn't kill him," he said, voice shaking. "But I didn't stop it either." Emily stepped back. Her hand trembled. Tara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You raised him. You pretended to love him. But you let me take care of it because you were too much of a coward to do it yourself." "Tara!" Charles shouted. "That's enough." But Tara had already reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small pistol. Emily froze. "Put it down," Charles said, stepping forward. "No," Tara whispered. "She knows too much." Emily's heart raced. "Don't do this," she pleaded. "This isn't who you are." Tara's eyes filled with rage. "You don't know anything about who I am." She raised the gun. And then, a deafening bang. Emily didn't back away. She looked Tara in the eyes, her voice steady but soft. "You don't have to do this." Tara's hand trembled slightly, though the pistol didn't lower. Her face was a mask of control, but her eyes betrayed something else. Pain, regret. Emily took a small step forward. "I read everything. The birth certificate, the trust. Nathan's journal. I know you were angry. I know you felt betrayed. But this won't fix it. Tara's jaw tightened. You think this is about fixing things? No, Emily said. I think it's about being seen. About finally maturing in a house that only cared about bloodlines and image. That landed. Tara blinked just once, and her breath hitched. Her grip on the pistol faltered for a fraction of a second. You think Nathan ever saw me? She said, her voice suddenly raw. He was too busy being perfect. Even when he wasn't Charles's son, he still got everything. Every look, every word, every piece of the future. Emily swallowed, voice gentle. And you got what? Cold glances and duty. Tara laughed, sharp and bitter. Exactly. I stayed. I played the good daughter. I covered the mess. And when I started to question it, when I told Charles we should tell Nathan the truth, he shut me down. Said it would ruin the legacy. That word again. Legacy. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Emily stepped closer, now just a few feet away. Nathan wasn't your enemy, Tara, and I'm not either. We were both used by this family. By Charles. We both lost him. Don't lose yourself, too. Tara looked at her for a long, silent moment. Then she whispered, You sound just like him. Emily gave a faint smile. I hope I do. Tara blinked rapidly, as if something inside her was cracking open, like a dam too old to hold. And for a second, just a second, the gun lowered. That was when the door creaked open, and Charles stepped in. Smoke filled the air. Tara gasped, stumbled back, and dropped the pistol. Blood bloomed on her shoulder. Charles stood frozen, holding his own gun, hands shaking, eyes wide. I'm sorry, he whispered. I had to. Tara collapsed onto the carpet, screaming in pain. Sirens wailed in the distance. Emily didn't know who had called the police. Maybe it was Charles. Maybe it was fate. But moments later, red and blue lights flashed across the windows, and the house that had once held so many secrets finally let them all out. Charles Carter was arrested for conspiracy and obstruction. Tara was taken into custody, charged with attempted murder. The Carter estate fell like a house of cards. And Emily? She walked away with nothing, except the truth, and her life. 1 year later, the Carter estate stood empty. The windows were boarded up, the gardens overgrown. The fountain in the front courtyard, once a symbol of wealth and pride, was now dry and cracked, vines crawling over its edges like veins of decay. Emily never went back. She had no reason to. Savannah was behind her. The lies, the whispers, the weight of blood and legacy, all buried with the past. Now, she lived in Asheville, North Carolina, under a new name and in a world of flour, sugar, and warmth. Her small bakery sat on a quiet street corner, its pale yellow sign swaying gently in the mountain breeze. Locals stopped by every morning for cinnamon rolls and war muffins. Children pressed their noses against the glass display to point at cupcakes with pastel frosting. And old couples held hands over steaming coffee as the sunrise crept through the windows. To them, she was Emily Lane, the kind baker with kind eyes and a sadness she never spoke of. But in truth, she was a woman who had survived. Every morning, she unlocked the front door with steady hands. Every evening, she swept the floors and smiled at the silence. And every night, before closing up, she lit a small candle on the back counter. For Nathan, for the boy who had tried to do the right thing and paid for it. One late evening in autumn, just as she was locking up, a man walked in. Tall, worn boots, quiet face. He didn't say much, just walked to the counter and handed her a sealed envelope. This is from Nathan, he said, voice low. He asked me to give it to you if anything ever happened. Emily stood frozen. The man didn't stay. He simply nodded once and left, the little brass bell above the door jingling softly behind him. With shaking hands, Emily opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in Nathan's handwriting, the ink slightly faded, the corners worn. Emily, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I tried to fight, but I knew I wouldn't win. I saw things I wasn't supposed to, heard things I couldn't unhear. But I couldn't walk away, not without trying to protect you. Please don't blame yourself. You were the only real thing in my life. The only part that felt like peace. Live. Love. Bake bread. Smile again. Don't let their darkness become yours. And if one day you ever feel the weight of it creeping back, just light a candle. I'll be there. Nathan. Emily pressed the letter to her chest, her tears silent and steady. She didn't cry for Nathan's death. She cried for his courage, his gentleness, his final act of love. That night, she locked the bakery and walked home beneath a canopy of stars. The wind whispered through the trees, and for the first time in a long, long while, she felt safe. And the next morning, when the first little girl tugged on the bakery door and asked, "Miss Emily, did you make the strawberry scones today?" She smiled, a real full smile, and said, "Yes, sweetheart. They're warm and waiting." Asterisk, she had survived the house, the family, the secrets, and now she was finally free. Asterisk.